Hey, if you're new to my channel, then consider liking and subscribing. It would really mean a lot to me, and honestly, it'd make my day. If you already did, thank you so much. Oh, and by the way, if you like listening to fan fiction, check out my other channel. The link's in the description.
One Piece Legends by xAlreadyOverx. Luffy dreams of becoming the queen of the pirates, not just to find the One Piece, but to prove Shanks wrong after he told her she could never be king. Armed with the powers of the gum-gum fruit and a fierce determination, she set sail despite her inability to swim, relying on her loyal crew and trusted first mate to survive the dangers of the Grand Line. But as the journey unfolds, Luffy begins to experience strange, unfamiliar feelings, especially whenever her stoic swordsman is near. Could it be more than just friendship? Or is this just one more mystery waiting to be unraveled on the high seas? And before we start, a massive shout out to the warlords of this channel: Case Clark, Leaf5_SCXR, Tristan Ward. You three are the backbone of this community. Your support means the world. Seriously, thank you for standing with me. If you want to join the ranks of these legends, hit that join button and become a channel member today. Let's grow this thing together. Much love, and as always, adios.
The Honorable Liar, Captain Usopp words expressive of life's lessons. Guitar chords reveal reflections, to moments passed by time's resolve. And the storyteller dances within verses. Subtle moments. Presenting images unknown yet understood by quiet souls, inside their own contemplations. Common bonds, unrelated thoughts, come together with shared embrace, as connective humanity by STP. After everything Nami had gone through this past day in Orangetown, particularly with Buggy, it was no surprise she found herself unable to sleep that night, kept awake by the swirling thoughts of everything that had happened, everything she knew would eventually happen, the treasure she had obtained that day, when she would have to return. The list was impossibly endless and it made her head hurt just to think of it. And then her thoughts turned to Luffy and Zoro, her new crewmates. She sighed, pushing herself up from her cot so she could sit against the wall of the small cabin on Buggy's tiny cruiser. How did all of this happen? It had all rushed by so quickly that it felt like a blur to her. The defeat of Buggy, the fleeing from the town, and the agreement she made with Luffy to stick with them until her needs were served. Then, she would ditch and take their treasure. That sounded right, it was what she always did. So why did she find herself dreading that coming day? Sad at the fact that she would have to leave that dorky girl and her brooding man behind? Shaking her head quickly in an attempt to throw all such thoughts out, she swiftly stood, giving up all thoughts of getting back to sleep that morning, and exited the tiny cabin for a bit of fresh air. The sun was bright and shining, and the sea was calm, just as she had predicted the day before. Nami breathed in the cool salty air, already feeling the calming effect it had on her working its magic. The other tiny dingy that contained Luffy and Zoro bobbled along next to her commandeered boat, and out of slight curiosity, she glanced over at it. What she saw had her eyes widening in surprise at first, and she froze, throat tightening with emotion, before forcing herself to relax. Placing a hand over her mouth to stop herself from laughing, she gave the sight before her a fond smile. Zoro lay in the middle of the boat on his side, left arm curled under his head as a makeshift pillow and sound asleep. And Luffy was curled up right against his chest on her back, right arm clutching loosely at the arm he had draped unknowingly across her stomach. Her other hand clutched her straw hat. Both of their faces were contented and peaceful, their bodies unconsciously meshing perfectly. Nami didn't know what she had expected when she first looked to their boat, but as she watched them sleep, she found that she wasn't really all that surprised. After everything she had seen from them during the past day, the care they showed each other, the determination, and urge to protect the other, she knew they fit well together. By now though, she was positive that neither had pieced together the obvious clues in front of them. At times, she doubted Luffy ever would. The girl was insightful and wise at times, but at her core she was still naive and innocent and would probably not understand her feelings for what they were. Zoro, on the other hand, she knew, would eventually figure it out. And then he would bury them and refuse to say anything to the girl. Nami rolled her eyes at that thought. Men and their pride. Even as she shook her head in resignation, small, caring, and rare smile came to her face. Oh, yeah. Now she remembered why she had chosen to follow them, to give them her all. Because they gave her hope, they were her friends. Luffy mumbled quietly in her sleep and tightened her hand on Zoro's arm, the slight sound drawing Nami out of her thoughts. She watched as Zoro shifted slightly in his sleep at the noise and smoothed his hand over Luffy's shirt in a comforting way. Sush, he mumbled to her in exceedingly bad and tired English. Sleep, Luffy mumbled what could have been an agreement, before snuggling closer to the swordsman, who pressed a light kiss to the top of her head, before they were both out again. Nami smiled once more, her heart truly warming at the sight, before turning away from the two, thinking that she could let them sleep for a bit longer. The sun was high in the sky and it had to be at least midday, but Luffy and Zoro were still sleeping. Nami exited her cabin, having finally memorized every detail of the chart of the Grand Line they had stolen, and glanced over at the small rowboat. Zoro had turned onto his back, unconsciously pulling Luffy further onto him and allowing her to use his chest as a pillow. She, in turn, had rolled onto her side, still clutching her straw hat which now rested on Zoro's stomach. The positions looked so natural it was if they had planned to sleep like that, and Nami shook her head in exasperation. "Are you two going to sleep all day?" she asked, walking over to the edge of her boat. There was no reply except for a loud snore from Zoro. Nami narrowed her eyes, annoyed, and glanced around her boat quickly, before grabbing an apple from the barrel next to her cabin door. She stared at the apple for a second before turning and throwing it straight at Zoro's face, hitting him square on the nose. He sat up with a scream of pain, right hand clutching the sheath of his white sword, which Nami had not noticed earlier, and left wrapped around Luffy, holding her securely against his chest. His eyes quickly scanned the surrounding area before settling on Nami. "What the hell is your problem?" he screamed, narrowing his eyes at her and growling. Nami ignored his screeching shout, and took a deep breath so that she could calmly reply. "How can you sleep all day like this? What if someone attacked us while you were still asleep?" Well, it was calm by her standards. Just because I'm napping doesn't mean I'm helpless. My mind is always open and on high alert in case any danger approaches." Zoro smirked at the orange-haired navigator. As if he would leave himself or his captain unprotected. Nami frowned at his smug smile. She was not impressed with his boastful confidence, and she crossed her arms over her chest, subconsciously filing away that Zoro hadn't realized he was still holding a sleeping Luffy. "Don't try to act all high and mighty to me just because you're the so-called fearsome pirate hunter." Then she smiled, the kind of smile that said, "I've got you now." "You know, it's common for people with famous reputations to actually get stupider as time goes on," she joked, baiting him. "What did you say? Are you trying to pick a fight? Because I won't hesitate to fight a woman," yelled Zoro, his face darkening with anger and mild embarrassment, and the knuckles of the hand wrapped around his sword turned white as his grip tightened. "Go ahead. I dare you. I fought people dumber than you," Nami yelled back. "Bring it." Sparks could almost be seen dancing between the two of them as their anger built. "What are you two doing?" A quiet and innocent whisper broke the deadly silence, causing both Nami and Zoro to snap back to reality. Nami's eyes darted down to where Luffy was just now stirring in Zoro's arms, rubbing at one eye in an almost childish manner. Zoro, on the other hand, froze like a statue, just now realizing that he had been clutching the younger girl to his chest this whole time. Luffy tilted her head to the side in a cute manner, still awaiting an answer. "Oh, it's nothing. Zoro and I were just talking," Nami mumbled, trying to think up a quick excuse. "Oh, well, I guess that's good." Luffy let out a bright smile and yawned before sitting up straighter. Zoro's arm slid limply down her back, his mind still in shock over their current position. "You okay, Zoro?" He shook his head quickly and glanced down at the raven-haired girl still sitting in his lap. She was smiling at him and he caught himself staring into her dark brown eyes, a blush spreading across his cheeks. "G with me? She's my captain. I need to get a hold of myself before." "Zoro, I'm fine, Lou. Just still a bit tired," he replied quickly, glancing away from Luffy, and from Nami's knowing gaze. "Okay," she replied happily, satisfied with Zoro's answer. She gingerly climbed out of Zoro's lap and the swordsman immediately missed the warmth that had seeped through his body at her close contact. His hands clenched at his sides, fighting the urge to pull the she-pirate back against him and bury his face in the crook of her shoulder. "I don't know why I feel like this around her, it doesn't make any sense," he thought, teeth clenching. His head began to hurt and he pushed the confusing new feelings to the side, telling himself he would think more on it later. "Good morning, Luffy. Sleep well?" Nami asked, a barely noticeable teasing note in her voice. Zoro ground his teeth in annoyance, knowing that the navigator was going to hold this little scene above his head for a while yet. Luffy, oblivious to the unspoken question, nodded happily. "Yeah, I slept great." Zoro made a great pillow. She turned to grin at her swordsman but was quickly distracted by the sun shining in her eyes, missing the way Zoro's face darkened with a blush. "Ooh, the ingredients for my cream should be done drying soon. Now I can make some more of it for Zoro since I lost my other cream." "When did you have time to pick up medicinal stuff?" Nami asked, tilting her head to watch the girl curiously. "After you left with the mayor." Luffy replied happily. "I saw a store by that doggy's place and grabbed a few things while I was waiting. Last night I set out some stuff to dry. Like plant roots, bunches of seaweed, and rainbow algae." She ticked off the items on her fingers. "Now I can mix these and make a cream that will heal Zoro's wound. Makino taught me how." "How many times do I have to tell you? No need to worry about it. I'll just sleep it off," Zoro immediately replied, a little exasperated. Luffy had been pestering him about the wound all yesterday while they were sailing, and even though he kept telling her there was nothing to worry about, it didn't seem to make her stop worrying. "Are you an idiot? Sleeping won't make the wound magically disappear," Nami snapped angrily. Zoro just snorted and moved to lay back at his designated end of the boat to go back to sleep. Luffy giggled and climbed over into Nami's boat carefully, wanting to check the status of her ingredients and grab the rest of the necessary supplies. "Luffy, there is something I've been meaning to ask." "What is it?" the raven-haired girl replied while she settled onto the deck, placing her ingredients around her and preparing to make her medicine. She brought out an old-looking bowl that she had borrowed from Nami's boat and put some of her dried seaweed in it before grinding it with the pestle. "Both you and Captain Buggy are devil fruit users, right? But you're different. How many types of devil fruits are there, and how did you two manage to find them out here in the East Blue? It must have been incredibly difficult. What do they look like?" Nami continued to ask all the questions that had built up since watching the fight yesterday. Zoro opened one eye. He also wanted to know about those devil fruits in case he ever had to face one someday. Luffy nodded as she proceeded to smash the seaweed. "Yep, that right. Devil fruits are originally found in the Grand Line, but I guess it's possible to find them anywhere. Old legends say that there are more than 100 different kinds of devil fruits, but the devil fruit only has 3 types that determine the base form of the abilities." "Wait a second. You say there are more than 100 different devil fruit? Then how come there are only 3 types of devil fruits?" Nami was bewildered to hear that there were so many countless devil fruits that could give people powers as strange and crazy as Buggy's and even Luffy's. It was insane. "I don't know why there are only 3 types of devil fruits in the world. There just are." Luffy shrugged, stopping in her mixing to cross her arms over her chest and tilting her head to the side as she tried to remember all that Shanks had taught her about devil fruits. The 3 types of devil fruits are Paramecia, Zone, and Logia. Each one has different forms of powers and abilities. First, the most common type is the Paramecia type, which is what both Buggy and I have. Paramecias gain superhuman physical abilities or powers. Some users can alter features of their bodies or their environment. Others can even manipulate and generate some kinds of substances. The second type is the Zone type. The users of Zone-class devil fruits gain the ability to transform into an animal and access all of that animal's strengths and weaknesses. There are Zone devil fruits not only for normal animals, but for super ancient or some legendary creatures as well. Luffy paused and turned to grab the pile of dried plant roots before adding them to the mortar with the seaweed and continuing her mixing. Lastly are the Logia type. These guys are bad news. If you eat one of those, you'll gain the ability to transform into one of the elements. Logia devil fruits are considered the most powerful as well as the rarest of the types of devil fruit as a whole. I've never seen one, but I've heard there's Logias for water and fire, and probably lightning and other things. Once she was finished, silence engulfed the 3, the only sounds coming from Luffy's mixing. Zoro didn't move an inch after Luffy finished explaining, but a smirk spread across his face and his eyes showed exhilaration. Each of these devil fruit users could be way stronger than Buggy and would be a perfect way to test his skills and grow stronger. Nami just cringed as every word that Luffy spoke sunk into her brain. Every one of these users was automatically dangerous and deadly in her book. If Buggy was strong, then there was bound to be someone a hell of a lot stronger that made the clown pirate look like a wimp. Then Luffy turned her head, as if she sensed Nami's distress, and grinned happily. "Don't you worry, Nami. Even though they're strong, I'm a lot stronger and Zoro can beat anyone we face that uses swords." Zoro's smirk widened in response, confident he could take on anyone who dared to face him. Not just him, anyone who even looked at his captain was going down as well. "You two are completely bonkers," Nami yelled. After what seemed like an hour had passed, Luffy had finished enough of her cream to cover the wound Buggy had inflicted on Zoro. She grinned at her achievement and climbed back over into her boat before walking up to where Zoro was laying peacefully, like one big, lazy cat. "Okay Zoro, the cream is done. Now lift up your shirt so I can spread it on your wound," Luffy sang, humming happily. Zoro cracked one eye open and sighed. "Lu, I don't need any medicine or anything, I'm fine. I'm as healthy as an ox, so there's no need for any medicine." Zoro's eyes slipped closed when he finished. Luffy stood there for a second, watching her first mate before saying, "I see." Then suddenly, she leaned over him and started to pinch his cheek really hard, pulling on him until the swordsman sat up with a shout. "What in the bloody hell was that for?" Zoro yelled, rubbing at his cheek and staring at Luffy in shock. He hadn't expected her to do something like that. Even Nami was stunned and she had seen the whole thing. Luffy replied with an easy smile. "Because Zoro is being stupid. When I see a wound, it needs to be treated, not ignored. Zoro won't be able to fight if the wound gets worse, no matter how small the wound is," Luffy said. Still smiling, Nami bit her lip, trying so hard not to laugh while Zoro growled. As much as he hated to admit it, she was right and that damaged his pride. As he was about to tell her to get the medicine, Luffy pulled his shirt up and started smearing the cream on his wound without warning. What the? You cannot just do that to other people like that. And can you at least wait till I give my slightly annoyed at her for invading his private zone and at himself for immediately basking in the closeness between them. "It's done, no thanks are necessary," she said, patting his stomach reassuringly after she neatly rewrapped the bandages around Zoro's side. "Were you ignoring me?" Zoro asked in an almost deadly calm tone. Nami muffled her giggle as she watched the two interact with one another. Zoro appeared to be angry with the raven-haired girl. But Nami knew that the swordsman was never truly angry with his captain and the other girl seemed to know it too. Luffy continued to smile at her first mate, settling herself down into the small space between his legs before continuing their impromptu staring match. Nami just shook her head, amused, before turning to look at her map again. They continued to sail for another hour, Nami's frown deepening by the minute as she considered the situation they were in. She knew that the Grand Line was also called the Pirates' Graveyard. The ocean itself was so treacherous that no one could survive for long on the Grand Line, even with serious preparation. Even though both Luffy and Zoro were strong, that didn't mean they could survive that sea on their own. "There's no way we can go to the Grand Line in our condition," she finally spoke, her tone serious. Both Zoro, who was napping, and Luffy, who was sitting on the figurehead of the boat eating an apple, turned at Nami's voice. "You're right, we can't survive by just eating apples, we need meat," Luffy said, chucking the core of the apple overboard. "And some sake would be nice too." Zoro spoke then and was quickly greeted by a flying apple in the face, courtesy of Nami. "Is that all you two think about? Food is the least of our problems. I'm saying that the Grand Line is the most dangerous place in the world. There are other pirates who are looking for One Piece and they have strong crews and better ships. Not only do we lack numbers but we also don't have a decent ship," Nami explained patiently. "So we just need more crew members, maybe a chef, and a musician," said Luffy. "Musician?" Zoro started laughing at Luffy's priorities in terms of crewmates and Nami just sweat dropped. "This is no laughing matter," she eventually exclaimed. "If we head south, there's a small inhabited island. It would be best to find a good ship there." Nami sighed and turned back to looking at her various maps. "Ah, finally. Let's go get some meat," Luffy yelled, throwing her arms up in excitement. "And some sake too," Zoro added, closing his eyes again. Why am I even bothering to talk to either of you? Nami sighed. Meanwhile, in Syrup Village, it was a quiet and peaceful morning in the slow and typically uneventful town. Suddenly, a boy emerged from the forest, running down the path that led to the north shore. He wore a dark yellow plaid bandana, a blue and white striped armband on his left arm, brown overalls with a white sash and no shirt underneath, and carried a yellow satchel and a pair of rectangular goggles strapped around his bandana. "Pirates are here, they are here on the coast," he screamed, sprinting through the small town. "Their bloodlust is like nothing you've ever seen. Please run for your life." He eventually began to slow, huffing and panting from all the running, trying to get air back into his heated lungs. After he regained his breathing, he suddenly threw his head back and laughed. "Lie, it's all a lie." He laughed some more, amused by his prank, when a fraying pan slammed into the side of his head. "You liar, wait till I get my hands on you," a man yelled from the window the frying pan had come from. Then a door burst open and another man emerged holding a broom. "You never learn, do you?" The thrower of the frying pan emerged from another door, holding a second frying pan in his hand. "Once we're through with you, you will never tell a lie again." One by one, the remaining doors began to open and more people holding weapons emerged. They all began to charge the boy, attempting to capture him, but the long-nosed boy didn't appear to be the least bit afraid of them. He actually appeared to be looking forward to the chase as his body began to shake with anticipation. "Wait for it, wait for it, wait for it, wait for it," he mumbled quietly, counting down before turning to run off, laughing in delight. "Come and catch me," he yelled as he ran back towards the woods and disappeared from sight. The villagers followed suit but quickly lost sight of him. It was a daily occurrence for them. He would lie, bait them, and run off before they could catch him. "Great, he got away again. That boy has been causing nothing but trouble." With a sigh, the villagers finally gave up and slowly made their way back to their houses while the long-nosed kid watched from the branches of a tree, snickering at their retreating forms. That'd been his best lie yet, and he lay back on the thick branch enjoying the peaceful breeze and warm sunlight. Today's lie was good. The refreshing wind sweeps through this boring village once again, signaling another normal day. His peaceful relaxation was soon disturbed by a loud and familiar voice. "Hey, there he is." The long-nosed boy looked down to see two new boys. The first one was a freckled boy with short spiky purple hair wearing a red hat with a pirate's Jolly Roger on it. He wore a black sweater, a sash, lightly brown pants, and dark-colored shoes. His name was Carrot. The other one, named Pepper, had dark green hair shaped like a pepper. He wore a light green shirt with the same pirate's Jolly Roger on the front. He also wore a sash, dark blue pants, and black shoes. "Good morning, Captain Usopp," Pepper said, raising his wooden sword. "The Usopp pirate crew is here." Carrot, the first boy, raised his wooden sword too as the long-nosed boy, Usopp, jumped down from the branch and greeted both with a smile. "Good morning, my fellow crewmates, but where is Onion?" Usopp asked. He soon got his answer when he heard a screeching scream. They all turned to look and saw their friend Onion running toward them, looking very much afraid. He had straight brown hair and he wore glasses. He had on a yellow shirt with a blue jacket over it. He also had a sash, dark brown pants, and black shoes. "It's horrible, horrible, horrible," Onion yelled from afar. "It's Onion," Carrot said, sounding bored. Onion was almost as bad as Usopp when it came to lying. "What's he yelling about?" Pepper asked. "Pirates are here. There's a boat heading toward our village." Onion yelled, but none of his friends believed him. They just sweat dropped. "Stop that, Onion, only I can come up with lies," said Usopp, a disbelieving expression on his face. "It's not a lie, it's true, I saw it." "True?" Usopp nervously asked. And Onion nodded, much to Usopp's dismay. The older boy quickly turned and began to sprint away. "I just remembered something, I forgot to bring my snacks." "You lie," the boys said in unison. "Then I'm sick, the doctor said if I don't eat my snacks I'll die." "Liar, Captain, didn't you want to be a real pirate? How can you be a real pirate if you're afraid of other pirates?" Carrot asked. Usopp flinched at the question. It had been his dream to become a pirate ever since he was a kid. Maybe this was his chance. "I saw two boats and one of them had Buggy's flag on it," Onion continued, waving his hands for emphasis. Usopp began to shake like a leaf. He had heard of the buggy pirates. They were the meanest pirates in the East Blue. Screw that chance, he didn't want to die. I better run, Usopp thought, and he slowly turned back to continue running, but before he could take a step, he heard Onion continue. But there are only 3 pirates, 2 girls and 1 man. Alright, let us fight. The Usopp pirates will protect the peace of this village, Usopp yelled, quickly changing his mind, as he stood in his hero pose. The boys shook their heads in exasperation, knowing that the only reason their captain wasn't running away was because there were only 3 pirates. Onward, to and off to defeat the incoming pirates. The kids watched him go, a little impressed. Even though their captain could be a coward, they still admired his courage and drive to protect his beloved village. Nami, Luffy, and Zoro had finally made it to the island after sailing for another few days. Luffy was grinning like a happy child and bouncing from one foot to another, wanting to explore and hungry for some real food. Nami had told her that the village was called Syrup Village and it had to have something she could eat. Zoro was yawning and stretching his cramped muscles, uncaring about his current surroundings. It's been a while since we've been on land, Zoro sighed, stretching his back, keeping one eye on his captain. He knew her penchant to run off as soon as they hit land. Ah, so the village is further down that way, right Nami? Luffy asked as she stared at the rocky slope that would lead to Syrup Village, already inching her way up the path. Yes, although it's just a small village. Let's hope we can find a decent ship that will get us to the Grand Line, Nami replied with a nod, rereading her map. Do you think they have meat here? I'm starving, the raven-haired captain whined, rubbing her flat belly soothingly. Is that all you think about? Nami hissed, annoyed by her seemingly one-track mind. As Zoro yawned again, he heard a rustling from the bushes and swiftly put his hand on the handle of his white katana. Be careful, we're not alone, the swordsman muttered, causing Luffy to freeze and glance around, excited. Where? Is it an enemy or meat? She asked, automatically moving closer to Zoro, trying to see where he was looking. Watch out, Zoro yelled, hearing the attack as soon as it was launched, and then out of nowhere someone was shooting bullets at Luffy. She avoided every invisible bullet, her movements almost graceful as she dodged back and forth. The attack stopped after a second and several pirate flags emerged from the bushes, surrounding the Straw Hat crew. Wow, this is awesome, she laughed, looking like a kid in an amusement park, as her eyes darted around the area. This isn't the time to be amazed. Nami's voice came from behind her and Luffy turned to see that her navigator had ducked back behind her boat. The she-pirate giggled at her friend's nervousness before turning back to the enemy in front of her when she heard a confident laugh. Before her stood a boy with a long nose. He was smirking down at her, holding onto a pirate flag planted in the ground next to him. Luffy gasped in surprise and shock, her eyes quickly scanning the boy, recognizing him from somewhere. Wait, that guy is. I'm the captain of the great Usopp pirates and you 3 are trespassing in my territory. I strike fear into the hearts of the citizens with just the mention of my name. Now, behold and beware. My 80 million men will crush you like a little bug if you don't leave immediately. Usopp's voice held as much arrogance and confidence as he could muster as the flags around him fluttered proudly in the wind. Nami just rolled her eyes, at both the boy's speech and at Luffy's clearly impressed face. It's a lie, the Orangeette said bluntly, rising from her hiding spot and approaching the group. Oh no, she saw right through it. Usopp's smug demeanor immediately faded and he began to panic, fearful now that he had been discovered. See, he even said it, said Nami pointing at him, exasperated, but Usopp couldn't let her win completely so he quickly came up with another lie. Okay, so 80 million men might have been a bit of an exaggeration but I do have many strong and powerful crewmates that can beat you. As if to prove his point the flags started to shake, controlled by Carrot, Onion, and Pepper who were hiding in the bushes. Nami saw the 3 boys out of the corner of her eye and sighed again. I only see 3 of them. Ah, she found us. Run, all 3 of the kids dropped their props and scrambled back towards the village, leaving Usopp to his fate. Hey, you guys, don't leave me, Usopp whined, taking a step back as Nami approached him, picking a small ball up off the ground near Luffy's feet. A pirate that uses pinballs, she muttered to herself, examining the small metal ball. I've never heard of such a thing. Luffy just laughed, amused and a little impressed. "You're a pretty funny guy," the female pirate giggled, finally remembering where she recognized Usopp from. She was so excited to finally meet him, the son of the red-hair pirate's sniper. Her laugh only seemed to anger Usopp though, and he growled, "Shut up, don't you dare laugh at me. I'm a very prideful man because of my greatness. People call me Usopp the Great." Usopp drew out his green slingshot with a flourish, inserting a pinball and aiming the weapon at Luffy's head. The girl just continued to grin, not the least bit concerned by his threat. "As you saw earlier, my slingshot skill is better than a pistol, so don't you dare make fun of me," he continued. Luffy just tipped her hat, covering her eyes, and quietly said, "Now that you've drawn your weapon, are you willing to use it?" Her tone was cold and she lifted her head, revealing only one eye, a mischievous smirk on her lips. Usopp got goosebumps just by staring at the black-haired girl's expression. "Pistols are not for threats, they're for action," she continued, scaring the long nose even more. Zoro stared at Luffy, a little surprised at her suddenly serious demeanor before catching on to her plan. He smirked meaningfully before pulling out one of his katanas and taking a step forward. "The girl that stands before you is a real pirate," he said, giving Usopp a sinister look that could even scare a fleet admiral. Usopp flinched back as he stared at the shadowed and menacing looks on their faces. He started to sweat uncontrollably, and the continued silence didn't help his fear, and he finally dropped to his knees, hands on the ground in front of him. "Oh man, real pirates are so cool. A real pirate's speech is much more intimidating, incredible," the boy moped, shaking his head. Zoro and Luffy glanced at each other for a second before both began to laugh. Luffy's hands wrapped around her stomach as she bent over, giggling. She had always wanted to say that. Zoro just watched her laugh, grinning himself. "I stole that line," Luffy finally admitted, straightening up and tipping her hat back. Usopp frowned, not quite understanding what she meant, so she continued. "I stole that line from pirate I admire, Shanks." Shanks? You mean you know red-haired Shanks?" Usopp asked in disbelief. Luffy nodded, still smiling happily. "Yeah, you're Usopp, right?" Luffy vaguely remembered what name Usopp had told her, and the long-nosed pirate had just mentioned his name, so she was pretty sure she had it right. Yeah, how do you know my name?" Usopp was surprised that this girl he had just met already knew his name, forgetting that he had mentioned it to her earlier. "I know because I know your father, Usopp." Once she said his father's name, Usopp gasped in utter shock and lost his balance from where he had been attempting to stand back up. He tumbled forward, falling down the cliff to land in a pile at her feet, thankfully unharmed. "It's true. That's my father's name. Please tell me about my dad." Before Luffy could reply, her stomach growled loudly. She blushed, a little embarrassed that her stomach had made such a loud noise. "I'll tell about your dad once we get something to eat," she giggled. Zoro saw her blush and felt his heart flutter slightly. She looked kinda cute like that. Once he realized what he was thinking, he mentally shook his head. "What the hell is wrong with me? First the boat, then this. I'm not thinking straight. Maybe I'm just hungry, that's got to be it." He nodded, attempting to convince himself. After the gang introduced themselves, Usopp led them to the town's restaurant and ordered food. As they enjoyed the peaceful silence while they ate and drank, Luffy struck up a conversation about Usopp's dad. "I was young." "So my dad is one of the red-haired pirates?" Usopp asked excitedly, remembering what Luffy had said. The girl nodded as she took another bite of food. "Yep, that's right. Your dad talked about you non-stop, practically made my ears bleed. I knew it was you when I first saw you." She scratched her cheek, trying to remember what had first caught her attention about him. "You look so much like him, except for the nose." "Wow, I never thought my dad would be a part of the famous pirate Shanks crew." Usopp was really proud of his dad. To be a main member of such a famous pirate crew, his dad really was something else. "That's right," Luffy exclaimed. "He is considered the best sniper in Shanks' crew. He can shoot an ant between his eyes, blindfolded. I saw it once and it was so cool. Usopp is a great pirate." Luffy used her hands to emphasize her words, pointing between her eyes as she talked. "Yeah, to risk his own life and indulge himself in the vast and endless sea. I feel so proud of my father." Usopp sighed happily, eyes unfocused as he dreamed of a life of adventure for himself, wanting to be a pirate just like his father. Well then, this makes our search a lot easier, said Nami, relieved. What do you mean? Usopp asked, turning to the orange-haired navigator. Do you know if there's anyone who can build us a ship or a place we could acquire a large ship in this village? Sorry, nope, Usopp shook his head sadly. As you can see, my village is pretty small, so there is no way I can fulfill your request. What about this big mansion on top of the hill? Zoro asked, gesturing out the window towards the large house. Usopp cringed slightly. Hey, do you know them? Nami had noticed Usopp's slight twitch. I wonder if we can ask them to give us a little financial support? The navigator's eyes had switched to Barris as she thought of the amount of money those rich people had to have. Stay away from that place, Usopp shouted, jumping to his feet and surprising everyone. I suddenly remembered that I still have something to do. So stay here and eat as much as you want and don't worry about paying the bill. I already talked to the owner of this restaurant, he's a good friend of mine, so see ya. And then he was off running, leaving behind his new friends. I wonder why he's in such a hurry. Nami frowned, pondering Usopp's strangeness for a second before shrugging it off, thinking it was nothing to worry about. Luffy and Zoro shrugged as well before all three continued to eat. On top of the hill was a very large and beautiful mansion that was heavily guarded. It had a garden filled with many exotic flowers that could only be found in the East Blue. Inside, in one of the rooms, was a girl. She was sitting on her bed holding her pillow to her chest in a tight grip. She was fairly tall, thin, and pale with blonde hair. She appeared to be very sick. Next to her was her trusted and most faithful butler, Klahadore. He was a slim man with glasses and slicked green and black hair. He wore a black suit with 2 golden ornaments on it over a white shirt with a curious collar, with spiral-like protrusions on the edges, and a standard black tie. He also sported striped shoes. You want to see Usopp, not this again, Lady Kaya, Klahadore sighed. His lady has asked him to see Usopp multiple times when she was clearly sick and barely able to walk. I'll be fine. I just want to see him, said Kaya softly. Klahadore sighed as he adjusted his glasses. That boy is nothing but a liar. His lies have become out of control and he may hurt you one of these days, my lady. But, your parents entrusted me with your safety and your well-being, he said firmly, adjusting his glasses again. Kaya was saddened to hear that, but she believed Usopp was a good person, despite being a liar, and had always believed that. As always, Klahadore was too overprotective of her and wouldn't let her see her friend. Now, I will leave your medicine here, please remember to take it on time, the man said, turning to leave the room. Stingy, Kaya mumbled. I'm okay with stingy but no means no, and then he left. Usopp managed to sneak inside the mansion using his secret passage by pulling aside a piece of a hedge that he had made long ago. Once he was in, he climbed up the tree and settled onto a branch that was right next to Kaya's room and knocked on her window using a pebble. After a second, Kaya opened the window and smiled, happy to see him again. Usopp, hey Kaya, you're looking weak as usual, Usopp said, saying his usual greeting as he seated himself comfortably on the branch. I'm sorry, I want to treat you as a guest but Klahadore just won't agree to it. She sighed softly before waving her arms hastily. But he's not a bad person. Don't worry about it, Usopp waved her off, grinning. After all, I'm a brave warrior of the sea. Being in a small room would probably suffocate me to death. Then they both laughed. So, what tale are you going to tell me today? Let's see, okay. I'll tell you about the time I fought the giant goldfish on an island in the South Blue when I was 5 years old. Goldfish? Yeah, I landed on an uninhabited island when I realized it wasn't an island. It was just his droppings I was stepping on. Usopp gave Kaya a disgusted look before grinning. They both began to laugh, just enjoying their time together. Just the two of them. Back with Luffy, Zoro, and Nami, the two girls were enjoying a calming herbal tea after finishing their meal. Zoro, on the other hand, refused to drink anything other than sake. All of them were relaxing, not knowing that they were being watched by the Usopp pirates, who thought that their brave captain was being held hostage by the 3 teens. That's them, Pepper confirmed, recognizing the people they had seen on the beach. Come on, let's go inside and rescue our captain before it's too late, Onion hissed, concerned for his captain's safety. But those are real pirates, we might get, eaten, Carrot whispered back, shaking in fear. He had heard that pirates were cannibals and he didn't want to get eaten. "You idiot, pirates don't eat humans," said Pepper. "Only witches." The purple-haired kid nodded to himself, sure he had remembered that right. "But there's no time for thinking now, we have a captain to rescue. This will be the Usopp pirates' greatest battle ever." They each raised their wooden swords and their eyes were filled with determination as they barged into the restaurant, startling the Straw Hat crew. "The Usopp pirate crew is here. Prepare yourself, pirates," they cried in unison, trying to make themselves look brave enough to scare the three pirate teens. However, they were greeted with silence. The Usopp crew began to sweat, worried, because not only had they failed to intimidate the pirates, but they didn't see their captain anywhere. This worried them even more and they sprinted to the table where the three teens sat. "Hey you pirates," Pepper yelled, pointing his wooden sword at Luffy. "What have you done with our captain, Usopp?" "Where's our captain?" said Onion and Carrot as well, their tone demanding that the three answer. Luffy just took a sip of her green tea, enjoying the silky warmth sliding down her throat, ignoring the kid's outburst. "Ah, nothing like drinking a good herbal tea after a meal," she sighed happily. "That was delicious." "Meal?" The Usopp pirates cringed and huddled together, their eyes darkening with dread. "Don't tell me the captain is." Onion didn't want to finish the sentence out of terror and fear, and Nami was covering her mouth behind them, giggling at the boys who thought Luffy had eaten their captain. What have you done to our captain?" Pepper asked, as he and the others began to shake and sweat. Zoro just grinned, enjoying the looks on the boys' faces and thinking of a way to make things a little more fun for him. "Your captain was," he began with a terrifying look on his face. "Delicious." And then the boys screamed, the sound high-pitched. Their eyes turned to Nami, who hadn't been able to hold in her laugh. Their eyes bugged out even further as they watched her and they screamed again. "Ah, a witch. What did you call me?" Nami yelled, slamming her fist into Pepper's head, causing a very large bump. Zoro started laughing wholeheartedly, one hand moving to cover his eyes. Luffy smiled over at her first mate as he took a sip of his sake, liking the sound of his laughter. It made her feel happy and light. She started to laugh herself, punching the swordsman lightly on the shoulder. "That was terrible, Zoro." She tried to berate him but couldn't keep the grin off her own face as he turned and smirked at her. "It was only a harmless joke." He chuckled, taking another drink of his sake. Suddenly, Nami bashed Zoro's head with her fist, causing him spit his drink out and leaving a big bump on his head. "You guys are nothing but idiots," she hissed, still a little annoyed at being called a witch. Her new crewmates were ill-mannered, but in her eyes, Zoro was the worst of them all. "Ah, it was only a joke, thank goodness," Pepper said, sighing in relief. The Usopp pirates were glad that their captain was okay. After the boys introduced themselves to Usopp's new friends, they guided them to where their captain had run off to, which turned out to be the big mansion that Zoro had mentioned before. "Wow, this place is huge," Luffy whistled, eyeing the mansion with glee. To her, it was just another place to explore and she was starting to get excited. "If you can't find the captain around this time of day, he's probably here," said Onion. "What does he come here for?" Luffy asked, turning towards the boy. "He comes here to lie," Carrot replied, moving to glance at the garden beyond the bars. "That awful, he shouldn't be doing that," Nami scolded, crossing her arms over her chest. "There's nothing wrong with it, what he does, it's different," said Pepper, defending his captain. "What do you mean?" Zoro questioned, a little curious. "Lady Kaya lives in this mansion and she is very weak," Pepper explained the story. "A year ago, her parents died of an illness, and she's been depressed ever since. Despite all the money she has, there was nothing that could cheer her up," Onion added. "That's why the captain makes up outrageous lies. He does it to make her laugh. Captain's lying ability is first class. I'm sure you've never heard of a pirate captain like that before." Carrot's tone was impressed. Even though they knew their captain could be a coward, Usopp was a good person and they wanted people to know that fact. "So Usopp is good guy." Luffy caught what the boys had been trying to get across and she smiled happily. She already knew that Usopp's son was a good person. She could see that from the moment she met him. What Usopp was doing for Kaya was sweet and the boys nodded in agreement. "I like the way he keeps meddling in other people's business," said Carrot. "I like the way he overreacts to everything," Pepper added. "I like the way he lies." Then lastly Onion added his opinion to the group. And that cheers the lady up. Nami appeared bewildered that Usopp's lies made the girl of the mansion happy, and as the boys nodded happily, she guessed that she had misjudged the long-nosed boy. Good, then let's go in and ask her for a ship, Luffy suggested, remembering what Nami had said about their reason for being there. The one that cheered her up is Usopp, Zoro remarked. Just because they were Usopp's friends didn't mean that the girl, Kaya, would help them out. Getting in is impossible. There are very large bodyguards guarding the gates at all times. Pepper sighed, turning to look at where Luffy was standing, only to find that the raven-haired girl was gone. "Where's Luffy?" he asked, wide-eyed, head swinging from side to side. "Let's go in and have a look," the she-pirate said, causing them all to look at where she was approaching the gate. "Wait, don't tell me you're," Zoro began, but he didn't get to finish it as Luffy grabbed onto the spikes at the top of the gate before stretching herself back, preparing to slingshot. "What is she? What's going on?" she stretched. "Sorry to," as Luffy readied herself to launch. Everyone sprang forward, grabbing onto the girl in an attempt to stop her. "Intrude," she yelled as she flew over the gate, taking the others along with her. "Then we threw a huge pinball down from the sky, scaring them away, and that's how we won." Usopp finished the story and Kaya clapped happily at the wonderful ending. She saw something in the sky. "Hey, what's that?" Kaya asked, pointing to the black dot in the sky that was slowly getting larger. Usopp looked up, following Kaya's gaze to see Luffy and the others, falling towards them really fast. "Yahoo!" Luffy sang happily before she slammed into the ground, taking the others with her while Usopp screamed in surprise. As the smoke cleared, it showed that Luffy and Nami had landed on the bushes, the Usopp pirates landed on a grassy field, and Zoro had been unfortunate enough to land on the stone path. The swordsman groaned in pain as he sat up, feeling like his bones were now broken into a million pieces. "Haha, now that what I call an entry," Luffy laughed, standing up and dusting herself off. "No, it wasn't," Nami yelled, trying to calm her racing heart. If she had her way, she never wanted to do anything like that ever again. "Are you alright?" Kaya asked worriedly, glancing at the new group, not recognizing the teens that had accompanied Usopp's normal crew. "It's okay, Kaya," Usopp soothed, waving a hand at the blonde girl dismissively. "They heard how great I was, so they came to join the Usopp pirate crew." Luffy turned towards the window where Kaya sat, not immediately dismissing Usopp's lie. "That's not it, we have a favor to ask," she asked, bowing towards the lady politely. "Favor? From me?" Kaya blinked, a little surprised. "Yes, we were looking for a large ship and, you there?" Luffy was cut off by a voice to her right, and she and the others turned their heads to see a man in a butler's suit tottering towards them. "Klahadore," Kaya whispered, shifting uncomfortably. Now that her butler was here who knew what he'd do or say. "You're trespassing," the man said, adjusting his glasses. "And causing trouble here," he added. Usopp flinched, a little worried now that the mean butler was here. He was probably going to get in trouble, and that would make it that much harder to sneak in here to visit Kaya. Luffy cocked her head to the side, not the least bit intimidated by the straight-laced man, and mumbled, "Who is this guy?" Meanwhile, in the middle of Syrup Village, a man was slowly moonwalking down the road that led from the south slope to the village. It was a very unusual thing to see. He wore a long coat and heart-shaped glasses, and the villagers watched the man and his strange moves, almost entranced by his oddness. Eventually, they shrugged and turned away, thinking that he was probably just a harmless man, not knowing that he would bring nothing but trouble to their town. The weirdest guy ever. Django the hypnotist. "Lies and deceit, it's all around me. Lies and deceptions, too bad surroundings. I see no point, I see no end. Those are your enemies, who you think are friends. You see and hear it, find it hard to believe, they don't want any good, but only to deceive. You don't know who to trust, everyone's a target, the things they'll do so hard to forget. Deceit and deception, over and over, the chances of good friends, like 4-leaf clovers, they'll think you don't know, or won't find out, but surely you do so without a doubt. The things that's done determines your fate, makes choices for the best, better soon than late. Lies spread like a diseased infection. Life's just full of deceit and deception," by Angeline Richards. Klahadore was livid. Not only had Usopp managed to sneak past him and was once again telling Lady Kaya all those stories, but he had brought along 6 other people. 3 he recognized as boys from the village, ones that followed Usopp around as part of his pirate crew. The other 3 were new though. A man, obviously a swordsman based on the swords he carried at his hip, and 2 women. The orange-haired woman was unremarkable, but there was something about the black-haired girl that irked him. The way she was watching him, almost warily, as if she didn't trust him. She had also been the one to ask Lady Kaya a favor. His glare deepened. This had gone far enough. Kaya seemed to sense Klahador's anger and she quickly said, "Excuse them, Klahador, these people are, you don't need to defend them, my lady," the butler interrupted sternly, silencing the young blonde girl. He adjusted his glasses and turned to look at where she was leaning out of her window. "I will listen to your explanation later. For now, I'd like all of you to leave this area at once, or do you people have something to say?" His words were as sharp as a blade, but Luffy just stepped forward calmly, her face melting into a soft smile, as if she didn't notice his strict tone. "Yeah, we'd like a ship see, absolutely not," he snapped immediately, harshly, denying her request. Luffy's smile faltered slightly, a bit put out at his tone. Zoro placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, glaring at the butler. There was something he didn't like about that man from the beginning, but this just cemented it. He wouldn't let anyone talk to his captain like that. He ground his teeth together and moved to take a step forward when a small hand covered the one still resting on Luffy's shoulder. He glanced down to see her shake her head, her lips twitching back up into that small smile, and she glanced up at him before turning her gaze back to the butler. Klahador just adjusted his glasses again and shifted his gaze from the raven-haired girl to the large tree next to Kaya's window. "Usopp," he called out, knowing that the long-nosed teen had hidden himself in the branches of the tree in an effort to go unnoticed. "Crap," Usopp muttered, forcing himself back up onto the branch next to Kaya's window. "I hear rumors about you all the time. You're pretty famous in this village, aren't you?" Klahador said, his tone doubtful. "You could say that," Usopp bragged with a chuckle, settling himself back into view of the others and standing up on his perch. "So, you have faced all kinds of danger before. That's really something at such a young age," the butler spoke in a mocking manner that poor Usopp didn't seem to notice. Luffy's eyes narrowed slightly, her mouth set in a firm line. She didn't like where this was going. If this idiot of a butler insulted Usopp's son, she would knock him out. Kaya seemed to sense that some sort of insult was coming as well. She had a look on her face like she knew something very bad was going to happen soon and she wouldn't like it one bit. Usopp posed heroically and pointed at himself before saying, "You may address me as Captain Usopp. That will help spread my name throughout the world." "Captain, eh?" Klahador snickered as he pushed his glasses up again. "Then it's true that your father was a filthy pirate?" "What?" Usopp cringed, not hearing Kaya gasp next to him. "Klahador, stop this at once," the lady ordered, but Klahador ignored her and continued with his insult. "You are the son of a lowly, filthy pirate." Usopp's teeth were clenched and his whole body was shaking with fury. At the base of the tree, Luffy didn't appear to be doing much better. Her face was shadowed by her hat and her fists were clenched at her sides, knuckles white. "Although anything you do wouldn't be much of a surprise to me, would you please stop bothering Lady Kaya?" Kaya was upset at Klahador for saying such an awful thing about Usopp's father when the long-nosed teen had been nothing but nice to her and the others were scowling at the butler. "Who do you think you are? You have no right to call my father that," Usopp growled, but Klahador ignored him and continued. "You come from a totally different world from Our Lady. Do you seek her fortune? How many times will you try to deceive her?" "That's enough, Klahadore. Apologize to Usopp at once," Kaya yelled angrily. How dare Klahador accuse Usopp of being a scoundrel? Usopp turned to look at her, was surprised by her outburst and his eyes widened with worry. In her anger, Kaya had leaned forward and was now nearly hanging out of the window. If she lost her balance she would fall. "Hey Kaya, be careful," Usopp hissed, reaching out an arm towards the lady, just in case. No one seemed to hear him though, and even Klahador ignored the lady's position and continued with his rant. "Why should I apologize to such a barbaric man, Lady Kaya?" Klahador asked, sounding genuinely confused, if still a bit smug. "I'm just stating the facts, but I do feel sorry for you, Usopp. Your heart must be filled with hatred. Hated for your foolish father who abandoned you and your mother to take a life of a pirate." Klahadore shook his head with feigned pity as he continued to ramble and insult Usopp's father. Klahadore, Kaya whispered. You bastard, you'd better stop insulting my father. Usopp jumped from the branch he stood on, startling Kaya. She was worried he'd hurt himself but felt relief when she saw a flash of metal from the steel hook secured to the branch. It allowed Usopp to easily slide down and land safely on the ground. Once his feet touched the ground, the hook disengaged itself from the branch and coiled itself back into Usopp's satchel. Why are you so agitated? Klahadore asked, pushing up his glasses. It's times like these that you should just do what you do best. Lie. Why don't you lie and say that your father is just a marketing salesman, or that you have nothing to do with your father, or better yet, that he's not your real father? Klahadore continued to list off ideas, not noticing how Usopp's fists tightened at his sides. After a few seconds, the long-nosed boy snapped and charged forward, punching Klahadore hard enough to knock him to the ground. Usopp! Kaya gasped in shock. Captain! The Usopp pirate crew was also shocked. They'd rarely seen their captain this angry before, but to see him actually hit someone. Zoro, Nami, and Luffy just watched the scene before them, their expressions unreadable. See that? He immediately turned violent. No wonder they say, like father, like son, Klahadore snarled, wiping at his bruised cheek. Shut up! Usopp shouted, causing the butler to flinch slightly. I'm proud that my father is a pirate, that he's a brave warrior of the sea. I'm very proud of him. Usopp pointed at himself and took up his heroic pose again. Although it's true I lie a lot, I'm not ashamed of my heritage, and that heritage is something I am honored about because his blood runs through my veins. For I'm son of a pirate. He loudly yelled to everyone who was near, the pride clear in his voice. Luffy smiled fondly. Usopp was reminding her more and more of Usopp, so brave and respectful. She was so happy that she had found Usopp at this island. He was a true pirate. Maybe he would join her crew? She was drawn. Hen Klahadore snorted. Pirates are brave warriors of the sea, huh? You're pretty naive to have that belief. The butler slowly rose to his feet and calmly dusted his suit. What? But you're right about one thing. You admitted that pirate blood flows within you. You like to lie and would resort for violence whenever something upsets you. Your ultimate goal was to get Lady Kaya's fortune, and that's why you got close to her. What are you talking about? I would never. A pirate is a pirate no matter what you say, and your father's a pirate, which is proof enough. Klahadore shouted angrily. That's enough. I won't let you insult my father ever again. Usopp grabbed the front of Klahadore's suit again and prepared to punch him again when Kaya's voice stopped him. Stop it, Usopp. Please don't use violence again. Kaya begged, coughing slightly. Klahadore is not a bad person. He's only protecting me, so please. Her voice begged Usopp to stop, and as much as Usopp wanted to smack him to the ground, he couldn't hurt Kaya's feelings by hurting her butler, so he let him slip from his grasp. He would let his anger go, for Kaya's sake. Get out now, and don't come close to Lady Kaya again, Klahadore said coldly. Yeah, you don't have to tell me twice. Usopp snarled. He turned and pushed his way past Klahadore, refusing to look at the smug man until he was out of sight. The Usopp pirates were furious, and they stuck out their tongues and spat at Klahadore in an effort to anger the older man. You bastard, stupid butler. Our captain is not that kind of person, cried Carrot. That's right, you idiot, growled Pepper. Yeah, you idiot, Onion added, wanting to have his own say. Klahadore glared menacingly at the children, furious at them and their simple name-calling. His dark expression caused them to scream in fear, and they scrambled back to cower behind Nami. Luffy just glared at Klahadore, her stare intense, eyes promising retribution for what he had done to her friend. I'm gonna make you pay for what you just did, she mumbled, her words just loud enough for Klahadore to hear. Leave here at once, he ordered, growling at the raven-haired girl. Luffy gave him one final glare, her mouth set in a firm line before she walked past the butler, heading in the same direction as Usopp, the others following behind her. Zoro paused in his walk as he neared Kuro and favored the man with a dark look. It was a look that said, hurt her or get in her way and I won't even give you the chance to beg for mercy. One hand rested on the hilt of his sword for emphasis, and he nodded at Klahadore curtly before following after his captain and the others. Inside Kaya's room, the young lady was sitting on her bed again, her back against the headboard and her face buried in her pillow. She was sobbing softly, crying for Usopp and the horrible things that Klahadore had done to him. He didn't deserve that kind of treatment, he was a good person. Why couldn't Klahadore see him the way she did? She heard a soft knock at the door but didn't say, "Enter." She already knew who was outside. She heard the person open the door anyway and Klahadore entered, pushing a rolling cart that was filled with food and tea for her. "Time for your meal, Lady Kaya," the butler said softly. "I don't want it, I don't feel like eating," she mumbled quietly, refusing to look at him. Klahadore just sighed. "You will break the chef's heart by saying that. In consideration of your weak health, the chef worked long and hard on this," he said, trying to convince her to eat, knowing it would help her recover. He picked up a tall pot that was filled with warm milk and poured it into the teapot. As he did, Kaya spoke. "Why did you say such harsh things to Usopp?" Klahadore stopped what he was doing and stared at the small and fragile girl. "I know it's my fault for seeing Usopp without your acknowledgement, but you didn't have to say such awful thing about him and his father," she continued. Klahadore gazed at the little girl sadly. He knew he had been harsh, but why couldn't she see that this was for her own good? He put down the pot and said, "May I sit down?" he calmly asked. "Go ahead," she replied with a sigh. Klahadore sat on the side of the bed as he stared at Lady Kaya and spoke. "It has been 3 years since I came to this house." Kaya lifted her head up and stared at Klahadore to see that he wasn't staring at her but his eyes were staring at something on the ground. "What happened on that day, I still haven't forgotten," she understood what he was saying. 3 years ago, she was watering the flowers when she noticed Klahadore walking wobbly towards the mansion's gate till he collapsed. She remembered it clearly like it was yesterday. "At that time, I made a careless mistake and I was kicked out of the ship where I worked. Without a job or any money. I was on verge of death." He spoke as he reminisced about the day he was saved by Kaya's late father. When they saw he was dying, Kaya and her parents brought him inside their mansion, treated and nursed him back to health, and when he finally healed, Kaya's father took him in as part of the family and he worked as a butler. "Your late father saved my life and, you, are his most precious daughter. To speak to you as an equal like this, I'm aware that I may have gone overboard. However, I cannot find the heart to trust this boy because, if anything was to happen to you, how could I face your father, who took me in?" He covered his face with one hand and his lower lip trembled as if he was ready to burst in tears. "Forgive me, if I upset you in any way." "No, I'm not upset. I know what are you trying to do and I'm very grateful to have you, Klahadore, but you're wrong about one thing. Usopp is a good person," said Kaya, and then Klahadore got up and adjusted his glasses. "However, whether or not he's a good person is a different matter," he said it again. "Klahadore, you are so narrow-minded." "I'm fine with being narrow-minded," he said as he turned his head to Kaya and Kaya smiled in return. In the middle of the field on the outskirts of town, Zoro, Nami, Pepper, and Carrot were sitting against a fence. They were relaxing without a care in the world, as if they hadn't been rudely kicked out by that jerk. Onion wasn't with them, having said something about seeing something strange in the woods and had gone to investigate it. Luffy had disappeared as soon as they left the mansion, taking off in the same direction Usopp had gone. "Hey, where did Luffy go?" Nami asked, settling herself on top of the thick wooden fence. "Beats me," Zoro sighed. "Maybe she went after Usopp." Zoro leaned back against a post of the fence, his fingers interlaced and cushioning the back of his head. He wasn't overly worried about Luffy at the moment. For all the times he protected her, Zoro knew Luffy could take care of herself and this village was tiny. How much trouble could she honestly get into? "The captain should be there," Pepper said after a second, nodding. "Yeah, at the coast. Whenever he's troubled, he always goes there," Carrot added. "Do you want to go and check on them?" Pepper questioned, turning to glance at Zoro and Nami, adding them to the conversation. "Nah, I'll pass," said Zoro. Deep in his mind, he trusted his captain. She would know how to deal with Usopp just like she had when she confronted Helmeppo. Then Nami faced the boys and inquired again. "Speaking of which, where did your other friend go?" "Oh, you mean Onion? He's always disappearing off to somewhere," Pepper said, waving a hand dismissively. "Then he'll come out of nowhere, screaming," Carrot added, and right on cue Onion appeared over the crest of the hill. A look of sheer horror on his face, running towards them screaming. "It's horrible. See." The two boys stared at Nami with one eyebrow raised as their friend proved their point. Onion stopped to catch his breath before continuing. A man doing the moonwalk. A very weird man is doing the moonwalk. Liar, both Pepper and Carrot ys outrageous stories. It's true, look, Onion pointed down the path, and true to what he said, a man was walking backwards, doing the moonwalk. The weird man stopped and faced the three kids. Hey, who was it? Who's the brat that called me weird? I'm not weird, the man exclaimed, doing an odd spin before posing. You could have fooled me, scoffed Nami. That's ridiculous. I'm just a hypnotist passing by. A hypnotist, wow. Onion's expression was one of awe as he approached the newcomer. Can you show us? Pepper asked excitedly. Yeah, show us, said Carrot, and the man suddenly glared down at them, exuding a menacing aura. What? You must be joking. Why should I show my hypnotic skills to a bunch of strangers I hardly know? Alright, I'll show you. He conceded quickly, magically pulled out a metal ring from his jacket. He's going to show them anyway. Zoro sighed, partially ignoring the spectacle. After I say, 1, 2, Django, you will fall asleep, the man exclaimed, beginning to swing the ring left and right. Got it? Here I go. 1, 2, Django. As if a switch had been thrown, the three kids tumbled backwards, asleep. Unexpectedly though, the hypnotist collapsed, asleep as well. What kind of hypnotist are you to fall for your own trance? Zoro shouted, a vein appearing on his forehead. Usopp sat at the edge of a cliff on the south side of the island, legs crossed, watching the waves crash against the shore because of the gentle wind. The sights and sounds calmed him completely, but also produced a longing to sail on the open sea. Traveling from island to island, having adventures and excitement and feeling the thrill of adrenaline. Facing your enemies down like a brave warrior of the sea, like his father. But what always stopped him from leaving was Kaya. Ever since he first saw her, he had been in love with Kaya. He believed Kaya was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen and wished that he had the guts to tell her that. Then when he heard about her parents' death and sudden illness, he decided to take matters to his own hands. He mustered all of his courage and went to her mansion and told all her about his adventures in the sea, and thus began his daily routine. A routine for both him and Kaya. Always looking forward to seeing her bright smile. Usopp was so preoccupied with his thoughts that he didn't notice Luffy hanging from the branch in front of him. So this is where you were, Luffy said, smiling softly as Usopp flailed back in shock. Sheesh, it's only you. Can't you greet people in a normal way? What is it? What do you want? He frowned, not really in the mood to deal with anyone. Nothing really. She let go of the branch, balancing herself in a handstand, and started walking towards him in that manner. After a couple of steps, she fell to the side with a thud but didn't seem to mind the pain. Usopp blinked at the strange girl, shocked out of his sadness for a second before he returned to being somber. They sat in silence, the only sound being the waves breaking against the shore and Luffy clapping her soles together, hands gripping her ankles. That damn butler. How dare he insult my father like that? Usopp eventually mumbled. Yeah, that guy was a jerk and I don't like him either. It doesn't matter what anyone says, Usopp still is and always will be a great pirate, Luffy replied, turning to smile at Usopp, who felt his enthusiasm returning with her encouragement. Yeah, he sure is. In the great pirate era, my father sails the ocean without knowing what's ahead. I feel really proud of him. Say, what about you? Is your father a pirate too? Nope. Luffy shook her head. I don't have a father, in fact I don't even know if I have parents. Her words were straightforward, without a hint of sadness in her tone. Oh, I'm sorry. It's okay. I may not know much about my dad, but Shanks has been like a father to me. He kept telling me stories about his grand adventures, meeting new and strange people, the parties they celebrated every day, and he inspired me to become a great pirate and to be the first ever queen of the pirates like Goldie. Roger. He never stopped believing in me. Luffy smiled happily, her gaze unfocused as she thought back to her mentor and father figure. She really loved talking about Shanks, telling people about how amazing he was. Wow, he must have really loved you a lot to encourage you to sail through the ocean, huh? Usopp said, a fond look on his face. Yep, she laughed, rubbing her nose a little self-consciously. And one day we'll meet again and I'll show him how strong I've become. Usopp smiled, but it faltered after a second and he sighed. I wish I could sail to the open ocean one day as a pirate. But first I want Klahadore to come here and apologize for insulting my dad. He needs to beg for forgiveness, he said self-assuredly. You mean him down there with the weirdo? Luffy asked, pointing down the cliff where Klahadore was walking with the heart-shaped glasses guy. Yeah, that him. Wait a minute. What's he doing here? Usopp crouched down on the ground and pulled Luffy down too, inching his way towards the edge to listen in to the conversation between the two men. Django, didn't I tell you not to attract any attention in this village? Yet you were sleeping in the middle of the road, said Klahadore, irritated. That's ridiculous. I didn't attract any attention at all, and I'm not weird either, the man, Django, huffed. Klahadore frowned and adjusted his glasses with a bit of frustration. So, are the preparations for the operation complete? Of course, we can start at any time. The operation to assassinate Lady Kaya, Django said, smirking. Up on the cliff, both Luffy and Usopp cringed in shock. Usopp couldn't believe what he was hearing. This man, Django, along with Klahadore, were planning to kill Kaya. Just the thought of it, his heart stopped beating instantly. They couldn't do that. Don't say assassinate, that sound wicked, Django. Ah yes, an accident, it was an accident. Django chuckled, remembering the plan. We can't just kill her, Lady Kaya has to die from an accident, don't ever forget that. Klahadore bellowed at the last comment and sighed at his partner's incompetence. Sorry, we just have to wait for the signal to attack the village and then kill the little girl, right? Then, you will take her inheritance. Are you an idiot? Can't you use your brain for once? An outsider like me can't take her inheritance. I guess I have to retell you the plan again. Before we kill her, you'll have to hypnotize Kaya to write a will. In that will, you'll make her write that all her fortune will go to her trusted and faithful butler, Klahadore. A dark smirk formed on Klahadore's face and a frightening look entered his eyes. Usopp had never seen him like this. He could not believe it. The bastard that Kaya trusted with her life was betraying her to get her fortune. How could he do this to the girl whose late parents saved his life from the brink of death? Was he so heartless that he only cared for her fortune? It will be the first step of my plan to take over the huge inheritance. It's perfect, the butler chuckled as he pushed his glasses. I spent 3 whole years here to win everyone's trust. So no one would be suspicious, even if she left all her inheritance to me. You became her butler for 3 years just for this. It really surprised me back then, Captain Kuro, said Django as he did his weird dance spin. 3 years ago, you suddenly said that you wanted to quit being a pirate. You got one of your crew to act as you in order to have the world think that Captain Kuro was executed. That marked the beginning of your devious plan. It's no wonder they call you Captain Kuro of 1,000 plans. Django was still impressed by his captain's scheme. Don't call me by that name again, Klahadore, Kuro, scoffed at his vice-captain. I gave up my name 3 years ago. I just want her fortune and to not get chased by the government anymore. Then I will become a peaceful citizen. He smirked at his PLA. I can hardly imagine as you a peaceful citizen, so for the sake of your own peace, you even went so far as to kill the brat's parents? Now Django, her parents' death has nothing to do with me, it was unexpected, said Klahadore, or Kuro, truthfully, shaking his head softly. Oh well, it doesn't matter now, just hurry up and give the signal. Our ship has been anchored nearby for almost a week already. My men are getting impatient, said Django. He also couldn't wait to slice the girl into tiny little pieces after she wrote the will. Then all the fortune will be theirs for the taking. Up on the cliff, Usopp's heart couldn't stop pounding, as if it was ready to burst from his chest. To think that after all this time Klahadore the butler was actually none other than Captain Kuro of the Black Cat Pirates. This is bad, we just overheard their plan. I have to get to Kaya and warn her. Luffy, we have to get out of here. These guys are the real deal. That Captain Kuro is said to be the smartest and also the cruelest among all the pirates. I heard he was killed 3 years ago, but now he is alive and here, and he has been impersonating as a butler to get to Kaya's fortune all this time. If we let this happen, the village will be attacked and Kaya will be in danger. He imagined the villagers screaming in horror and Kaya's terrified face before a pirate struck her down before she could scream. This is really terrible. He grabbed his head as he tried to make the scary images go away. Luffy glanced between Usopp and the men, angry that they planned to kill someone who had been nice to her, someone that her friend cared about very dearly. With a frown she stood up. hands clenched tightly at her side and face determined. "Hey, what are you doing? Get down before they— Hey, you bastards, don't you dare hurt Kaya!" she shouted, trying to catch the man's attention. Usopp fell behind her, unable to believe that she was actually stupid enough to call Captain Kuro out. Below, the two men looked up to see the teens watching them from the top of the cliff. "Who the hell are you?" Django asked, his words harsh, but his tone a bit curious. "Are you insane?" Usopp panicked, scrambling to his feet. "Are you trying to kill us? We've got to get out of here." The long-nosed teen tried to grab Luffy's arm to drag her away but froze when he heard Klahador's voice. Well, if it isn't Usopp." Kuro's words were harsh and cold and his face appeared to be completely devoid of emotion. Usopp felt his body freeze with terror as he stared at the butler. "I've been spotted too. You wouldn't have happened to have heard our conversation, now would you?" His words were sharp, body coiled as if he was a viper waiting to strike. No, we didn't hear a single word of it. We were just passing through, that's all." Usopp backpedaled, trying to come up with a quick, but convincing, lie, still pulling on the raven-haired girl's arm. Unfortunately, Luffy wasn't one for subtlety and she always spoke her mind. "I heard everything," she said, placing her hands on her hips and glaring down at the two men. "Shut up," Usopp hissed, letting go of her arm to smack her on the shoulder. Kuro sighed, a little exasperated. Now that his plan and secret had been revealed to these two, he had no other choice. He used one arm to signal Django and pointed up at the two teens, silently ordering the other man to take care of them. "I guess it can't be helped." Django sighed, pulling out his hypnotic ring. "Hey, you two." Both Luffy and Usopp turned their gaze from Kuro to stare at the other odd man as he dangled the ring in front of his face. "Look carefully at the ring." "A ring?" Luffy, always curious, followed the ring with her eyes as it began to swing from side to side, looking almost like a cat tracking a bird. "I don't like this, it's got to be a weapon," Usopp exclaimed, covering his eyes with his hands and peeking cautiously between his fingers. Django began to swing the ring more purposefully as he talked. "With 1, 2, Django, you'll fall asleep, got it? 1, 2, Django." Before the words had even left his mouth, Usopp had leapt backwards, curling into a ball in fear. He cowered for a few seconds, but when nothing happened, he began to get curious. Uncovering his head, Usopp glanced back towards the cliff where Luffy still stood, her back to him. "That was odd," he muttered, moving to stand up. Nothing happened. "Luffy?" The long-nosed teen became a little concerned when Luffy didn't answer him and he took a step towards her right as she let out a soft snore. At the base of the cliff, Django had also fallen for his hypnosis and was currently using Kuro's back as a makeshift bed. "You idiot, you fell for your own hypnosis again," Kuro muttered, frustrated with his vice-captain. "I thought you had gotten that under control." "Asleep?" Usopp asked, watching Luffy warily, still a little confused. The girl let out another soft snore as she began to pitch forward, unable to remain standing while she was sleeping. "Hey, what are you doing? You're going to fall," Usopp cried, trying to grab her. He had reacted too late, though, and his hands missed her tunic by mere centimeters as she fell forward, tumbling down the cliff with a loud crash. She fell down. From that height no one could survive that fall. Django muttered, having finally woken up. He shook his head as he observed the girl's frail form crumpled on the beach in front of him. He hadn't really wanted to kill her, but orders were orders. Usopp clenched his fists on the grass as he knelt at the edge of the cliff, staring down at Luffy's unmoving frame. "Shit, that guy killed her. So, what do you want me to do with the other one?" Django asked, turning to Kuro as he pointed up at Usopp. "Nothing, no matter what he says, his words won't reach out to them. After all, he is nothing but the village's liar." Kuro turned away from the cliff face and he took a step back towards the village. "We will start the plan tomorrow morning," he ordered Django. "Attack the villagers at dawn and make it look like an accident when you kill Kaya." "Do you hear that, Usopp?" Kuro turned his gaze up to the long-nosed teen, smirking menacingly at him as Usopp forced himself to his feet and disappeared into the woods. "Are you sure about this?" Django asked. "Of course. My plan will not fail." His eyes flicked back over to the body of the girl who had tried to stand up to him and he grinned, feeling a rush of satisfaction at the sight. This is bad, The entire village that I know and loved will be slaughtered and Kaya will be killed too. I can't let that happen, Usopp chanted over and over in his head as he ran, trying to get to the village as fast as his feet could carry him. An image of Kaya's beautiful smile appeared in his mind and the memories that he and Kaya had shared, the stories he'd told her, the laughter they shared. The smile on her face brightened his heart with love. As each memory passed through his mind, tears ran faster and faster down his cheeks and he eventually let out a choked scream. Kaya, expose the plot, Pirate Butler, Captain Kuro. When explanations are hard to produce, lie after lie comes shining through. Truth gets locked away for reasons only known to yourself. Truth may hurt but the lie hurts more, one lie to cover another. What was the first lie? Can you remember? So much hurt and too many lies. What's the truth? Will I ever know? Can I ever separate the two? By Louise Whitwit. At the field, Zoro, Nami, and the Usopp pirates were still relaxing and waiting for Usopp and Luffy to return from the coast. It was a peaceful moment with birds twittering and the wind rustling through the trees. Suddenly Zoro felt a cold shiver from his head to his feet. It startled him and he reached out and pulled Watto closer, his body tensing, as if readying for a fight as his eyes darted around the field. Some part of his mind screamed that something bad had happened and it had something to do with Luffy. Could Luffy be in trouble? His fingers tightened around the hilt of his sword and his teeth clenched. Was she hurt? All he knew was that he needed to get to the coast, now. Captain sure is late, said Carrot, breaking the silence, not noticing Zoro's tensed appearance. He must be more depressed than I thought, added Onion. Whenever he gets upset, he always heads for the coast and stares at the ocean, said Pepper. Zoro brought his legs underneath him, prepared to spring to his feet in a moment's notice, but staying still and listening to the others talk. He couldn't shake off the feeling that Luffy was in trouble and he had no idea where the feeling was coming from. It worried him slightly but his thoughts were interrupted when the kids yelled out, "Captain!" He looked up just in time to see Usopp running extremely fast towards them, an alarmed look on his face. His eyes widened and his heart clenched when he realized that Luffy wasn't with the long-nosed teen. "Wait, isn't Luffy supposed to be with him?" he asked, pushing himself to his feet, his hand tightening on the handle of his sword. "Captain!" The Usopp pirates yelled cheerfully, trying to catch his attention, but Usopp just ignored them as he ran past. "Where's Luffy? Didn't she go to the coast with you?" Nami asked, taking a half step forward, a little concerned at the look in Usopp's face. The teen just ignored her too and kept on running. "You suppose he's still angry about having his father insulted and all?" she muttered, staring after the curly-haired boy in bewilderment. "I don't think so," Zoro answered, teeth clenched. "He's right, I've never seen Captain Usopp like that," said Carrot. "Ah, something must have happened," Pepper concluded. "But what could have happened to him?" Onion added. "Hey, do you know how to get to the coast?" Zoro inquired. He was really worried for Luffy's safety now. It wasn't like her to not be here. If Usopp was this upset she would have followed the boy, which meant that something was preventing her from coming. Zoro's eyes narrowed. If anyone had touched her he would personally deal with them. He glared down at the boys, who were still ignoring him. "You guys think that something's happened?" asked Carrot, pulling the other two boys into a group huddle. "Yeah, something must have happened at the coast," Pepper nodded. "The Usopp pirates will take action once again," said Onion excitedly. "Will you just shut up and tell me how to get to the coast already?" Zoro yelled, finally fed up with being ignored and wanting to get to the coast as quickly as possible. Once Usopp made it to his village, he started to shout louder than he ever shouted before. The lives of his beloved village and the people in it were at stake if he didn't warn them. "Pirates, pirates are here, I'm not kidding this time, pirates are real and they're coming, ruin." But his cries fell on deaf ears because none of them took even a second glance at him. His eyes twitched and he tried again. "Please listen, tomorrow morning, the pirates will be attacking this place, everyone run. Please." Nothing, not a single person was on the street. No windows cracked, no doors opened. No one was listening but he refused to give up. "Please, this is not a lie, real pirates are coming, please." And then to his relief, every house's doors began to open and one by one villagers emerged. But his relief disappeared when he saw the looks on their faces and that they were carrying large forks, brooms, and other objects. "Haven't you learned anything yet? When will your lies ever stop?" We had enough of your lies, it's time for your lies to end. Every one of them believed Usopp was doing one of his lie games again. Usopp quickly tried to reason with them, waving his hands in front of his face. No, it's not like that. This time I'm telling the truth, he insisted. However, none of the villagers believed him. Instead, they all gave him looks filled with mix of irritation and disappointment. Shut up, why should we believe you? Do you think we would fall for that? If only you were trustworthy as Klahadore, then we might believe you. That remark seemed to stab him right through his chest, and then he remembered what Kuro had said before. No matter what he says, his words won't reach them. After all, he is nothing but the village's liar. This was why Kuro didn't kill him when he had the chance. He knew that the villagers wouldn't believe a single word Usopp said, and what was worse, they trusted Klahadore like he was their friend. Usopp gritted his teeth in frustration and cursed that slippery man to hell. Everyone, please listen to me this time. Real pirates are coming tomorrow morning to attack this village. He told them again, practically begging, but it only made them madder. If we had believed your stories, we would have abandoned our village several hundred times already. Please, believe me, you've got to hurry, I'm telling you the truth. You'll be killed if you don't leave, this is the truth. This time, we will catch you and teach you a lesson. The villagers advanced on Usopp, who was forced to take a few steps back. He gritted his teeth, not knowing what to do, before turning and running away from the angry mob. Damn it! For the first time in his life, he regretted all the lies he had ever told the villagers. Because of that, no one would ever believe him. But there was still hope, he just had to get to Kaya. She was the only one who would believe him, Usopp was sure of that. Meanwhile, Kaya was in her bedroom, clapping her hands together with joy at the sight before her. Her dear friend Mary had just returned from his trip and retrieved the present that she had ordered. Mary was a tall, formally dressed butler whose most distinguishing feature was his lamb-themed appearance. His hair was curly like a lamb's fleece and he had 2 lamb horns sticking out of it. His lips also resembled those of a lamb's and even his collar had a fleece around it. He held out the purple box to Kaya, who quickly grabbed it and opened it, revealing a pair of brand new glasses. These will do, won't they? These glasses were especially ordered from the next town over and I've just returned with them, said Mary. Yes, it's perfect. I'm sorry to have made you run all the way to the other town, Kaya replied, smiling apologetically at Mary. There is nothing to be sorry for, Lady Kaya. The butler waved off her apology. It has been a pleasure to serve and help. After all, this is a present, isn't it? Mary exclaimed with a smile, and she nodded. Tomorrow will be the 3rd anniversary of Klahadore's arrival to this mansion. He has been taking care of me all those years, Kaya said softly as she hugged the case. I'm sure that Klahadore will be very delighted, Mary reassured. Both were smiling happily, thankful that Klahadore had come and become part of their life, not knowing that very same person was about to betray them. Zoro, Nami, Carrot, Onion, and Pepper had finally made it to the coast where Usopp usually went when upset, hoping they could find Luffy, but she was nowhere in sight, which worried Zoro even more. Are you sure, TM? I questioned, glancing around. Of course, this is where the captain comes whenever he's troubled, Carrot answered, crossing his arms over his chest and nodding. It makes him feel good being here, said Onion. Yeah, but where is Luffy? I don't see her anywhere, said Pepper, worried. Zoro frowned, eyes darting around the open area, hands still firmly grasping the hilt of his sword. Where could she have gone, he wondered. Luffiko. Nami walked towards the edge of the cliff carefully, balancing herself as she stared out and down at the ground below. This place is pretty steep, she mumbled to herself, moving as cautiously as she could. Nami, be careful there. Zoro spoke, not bothering to look at the oranget, his eyes continuing to dart around, looking for any sign of Luffy. All right. As she moved to slowly back away, her eyes caught a flash of red on the shore beneath her. Nami looked closer, her eyes widening and one hand flying to cover her mouth as she gasped in horror. Luffy! Everyone turned their heads in surprise, Zoro's heart clenching at the tone in Nami's voice. He and the boys quickly rushed to where she was standing and followed her gaze to the shore, gasping at the sight before them. Luffy lay at the base of the cliff, crumpled and surrounded by piles of rocks, looking for all the world like she was dead. Her hat had fallen from her head and lay nearby, fluttering slightly in the wind, and water from the coming tide gently lapped at her feet. Zoro continued to stare down at the girl, his mind seeming to not comprehend the sight before him, but his chest clenching in agony. "No, it can't be. This isn't happening. Luffy, Luffy. Luffy," he screamed, pushing past Nami as he moved to the edge of the cliff, finding a steep but solid portion that he could slide down. Rocks and dust tumbled down around him as he slid down the rocky slope, nearly losing his balance a few times in his haste to get to his captain. Once he reached her though, he stopped, frozen in place. His body felt numb and his blood ran cold as he gazed at the lifeless raven-haired girl, watching the wind ruffle her short hair. No, why'd I have to lose another one? Not her, please, anything but her. He shut his eyes tightly, unable to stare at her peaceful face, and felt tears begin to prick at the corners of his eyelids. He hadn't cried since that time, but he couldn't seem to stop himself, and his hands clenched into fists at his sides, his whole body shaking. "She's alive." The words broke through the haze forming in Zoro's mind, and his eyes snapped open with a gasp. He stared down at Nami, who had followed him down the cliffside and was currently checking the raven-haired girl over. The Orangette placed her fingers to Luffy's neck, trying to feel her pulse, wanting to be right, to erase that defeated look from Zoro's face. The swordsman watched Nami work, his chest swelling with hope, and he cleared his throat in an effort to mask the emotion in his tone before finally asking, "What? She's alive." The fall didn't kill her, but the impact must have caused her to fall unconscious. Nami explained, sighing in relief. Zoro quickly dropped to his knees on Luffy's other side and reached out, resting one hand on her covered stomach and the other on her head, hands shaking with relief. He clenched the hand on her stomach into a fist in an effort to stop the shaking and let out a relieved chuckle. "She's okay, thank goodness," Pepper exclaimed, the boys finally making their way to the teens, having taken the longer and safer way down to the beach. "I'm glad," Carrot added. Luffy had been nice to them, he was happy she was still alive. "But how did she survive that fall?" asked Onion, bewildered. Now that he was thinking clearly, Zoro thought he might have an idea. He had never really asked Luffy about the specifics of her devil fruit power, but if she could reflect a cannonball, then maybe she could survive a long fall. He was drawn out of his thoughts when a soft whimper came from beneath him, and he glanced down in time to see Luffy's eyes slowly flutter open as she regained consciousness. "Ow, my head hurts," she hissed, lifting one hand to massage at her head as she tried to sit up using her other. Zoro's hands were there as she did, helping the warm and very much alive girl into a sitting position. It was then that Luffy took notice of all of the people surrounding her. "What's going on, guys?" she asked, tilting her head, slightly confused. "What are you staring at me for?" Before anyone could reply, Zoro's arms wrapped around her and yanked the small girl into his lap, clutching her to him. He lay his forehead on her shoulder and chuckled slightly in relief, feeling a lot calmer now that Luffy was awake and returning his hug. After another second, he pulled back, placing his hands on Luffy's shoulders and forcing her to stare at him. When she tilted her head at him curiously, he grinned and she mirrored his smile. "You scared us, Captain," he said, squeezing her shoulders once more before releasing the she-pirate. Luffy opened her mouth to reply but froze when she remembered what had happened right before she fell asleep. Her eyes widened and a hand moved to cover her mouth. "Oh no," she breathed, glancing around, growing more worried when she didn't see the curly-haired teen. "Where's Usopp? Something bad is going to happen." Outside the mansion wall, Usopp was panting hard after running away from the angry mob. He was frustrated that no one in his village seemed to believe him, but what mattered now was Kaya. She was in more danger than the villagers, and warning her was the most important thing in his mind. He took one last gulp of breath, readying himself, and quickly removed the hedge block that he used to sneak inside the mansion grounds. He tossed it to the side, not caring where it landed, and made his way to Kaya's window. Kaya was on her bed reading a medical book in peace, when a small rock hit her window. She was startled by it but relaxed when she realized who it was. Usopp had come back. She got up from bed and opened the window and smiled at Usopp. "Oh Usopp, I'm so relieved that you're alright," she said, but her smile has disappeared when she saw the grim look on his face. She thought he was still angry at Klahadore, but she didn't expect what Usopp just said. "Kaya, you need to run before you'll get killed." "What are you talking about, Usopp? You've been double-crossed. Klahadore is actually a pirate. And then silence befall on them till Kaya spoke. Wait a minute. Is this part of your story? This is not story. I heard it with my own 2 ears. Klahadore is a real pirate. He became your butler for the past 3 years just to get your fortune. Don't you see, Kaya? He betrayed you so he can have all your fortune to himself. As he spoke, Kaya stared at Usopp seriously, trying to find out if this was really a joke. What are you talking about, Usopp? I heard him talking to an old crew member, saying that they were coming to kill you. Kaya's hands fisted in her lap as Usopp continued to talk bad things about Klahadore. She had never seen Usopp act this way before and it was making her upset with him. He's a cold-blooded killer. You need to hurry and escape, Usopp instructed, wanting her to move now, before it was too late. Kaya just looked up and stared right into Usopp's eyes and said, I know what he said was harsh and cruel, but to lie like this is not like you, Usopp. Usopp's heart clenched at her words. First, the villagers didn't believe him, and now Kaya too. No, I'm not lying. Then he started to shake. It hurt to hear that the one person he loved more than anything doubted him. It hurt so much that he couldn't breathe, he could barely force his words out. I'm telling the truth. I'm telling the truth. WHHHHHHAA. Kaya will be killed? The village will be attacked? Is this for real? The Usopp pirates screamed after Luffy explained why she was so worried about Usopp. Yup, that's what they said, no doubt about it. She nodded, crossing her ND leaning back against Zoro's chest. Since she had woken up, her second-in-command had forced her to remain sitting, letting the small girl use him as a sort of recliner. Nami had arched her eyebrow at Zoro when the swordsman pulled the she-pirate into his lap and forced her to rest against him. Though Nami couldn't really blame the green-haired man. She had seen his face when he thought Luffy was dead. He needed this contact with her. It didn't mean that she wouldn't tease him endlessly about it later though. As we thought, Klahadore is an evil person, said Carrot. No wonder he was so creepy. Pepper spoke. This must be the reason why Captain ran like crazy towards the village, Onion said, glancing over his shoulder at the village. Aren't you guys relived to have heard all this beforehand? Now we can escape before they can attack. They got careless, Nami stated, relieved. Yeah, she's right, we should make run for it too, said Carrot. Yeah, we should just take the important stuff, Pepper stated. Yeah, let's get out of here, Onion agreed, the three all nodding in unison before turning to run back towards their homes. Freeze, Luffy cried, throwing herself out of Zoro's lap and stretching her arm out to stop the three boys from going any further. We aren't going to run away. Usopp is probably on his way to the village to warn them, and even if they did escape I doubt that Jerk and his weirdo friend are going to let you and the others live. So first we will find Usopp and then we will fight those pirates, Luffy declared, snapping her arm back and grinning at the group. What? Nami and the Usopp pirates screamed, their jaws dropping to the ground in shock. Zoro, quickly recovering from the sudden disappearance of Luffy's warmth against his chest, just smirked knowingly. I guess we'll fight then. It's been a while since I fought and my swords are itching for a fight. He uttered, nodding at his captain, letting her know that he was behind whatever course she chose. Then it settled, let's go kick some pirate ass, she yelled, grinning. Do we have to? The others whined. Meanwhile, Usopp stared at Kaya, a look of disbelief, hurt, and shock on his face. She didn't believe him, not a single word that he uttered. She thought he was doing nothing but lying to her, and that hurt him more than he thought anything could. Kaya, on the other hand, was watching her long-nosed friend with a look of sadness on her pretty face. I really like the stories that you made up. I loved them all. Why did you have to say such a thing? She asked. Her vision swam in front of her face, Kaya starting to feel a little lightheaded, her legs turning to jelly. She braced one hand on the windowsill, about to fall, but Usopp saw he movement and caught her. His arms snaked around her waist, holding her close while his other braced against the window frame. Kaya, listen to me. I didn't say any of this to get revenge on Klahadore, he insisted, trying to assure her that his words meant nothing like that. Then, why would, Kaya? Before he could say another word, the bedroom door burst open and Mary entered, a vexed look on the man's normally calm face. Lady Kaya, are you alright? Mary gasped when he saw Usopp holding onto his lady. He quickly brought out a revolver that he had decided to carry just while the other servants were away. Usopp saw the flash of metal and placed his other arm around Kaya, jumping down from her window. With the agility of a cat he landed on his usual branch and then quickly jumped down to the ground, landing safely on his feet, Kaya held securely in his arms. Once he landed, he set Kaya gently on her feet, turning just in time to see 3 bodyguards with guns ready and loaded, aiming at him. But Usopp was prepared. He drew out his slingshot and with an accuracy he inherited from his father, knocked down the 3 men. Kaya watched the whole thing unfold before her with horror. Why was Usopp doing this? Why was he hurting them? What in the world had gotten into her friend? Her voice wouldn't work though. She couldn't make the questions come as she watched the long-nosed teen battle with a fury that reminded her of the tales of pirates. It couldn't be that what Klahadore said was true. That Usopp was nothing but a pirate who cared only for himself and that he was only after her fortune. It couldn't be that Klahadore's harsh judgment had been right. Once Usopp had taken down the last of the bodyguards, he ran back towards Kaya and grabbed her wrist. "Come, let's go," Usopp insisted, trying to get her to follow him, but Kaya refused to move. "Once tomorrow comes, you'll believe me, but for now, we need to leave. Please Kaya, you need to listen to me." Slap. Usopp's already cracked heart broke in a single instant when Kaya slapped him across the face. His cheek would be bruised later but he ignored the stinging pain, the real heartache coming from the fact that Kaya had turned away from him. She was refusing to look at him but he could clearly see her face, her expression marred with disappointment. "What you are doing is despicable," she muttered coldly. Usopp could no longer feel anything, the only thing he felt was the silence in his chest, where his heart felt like it was no longer beating. Then Mary rounded the corner and took aim at Usopp with his revolver. "Leave Lady Kaya alone." Usopp was brought out of his thoughts at Mary's shout and he dropped Kaya's arm, turning to run away. Mary followed Usopp's movement. His target sighted and prepared to fire but before he could shoot, Kaya stepped in front of him. "No, don't," Mary gasped and he quickly twitched his arm to the side, averting his aim away from his lady as his shot fired. Usopp cringed at the throbbing pain that suddenly bloomed on his left arm and he stumbled, feet tangling in a tree root. He quickly forced himself to his feet, covering the wound on his arm with his other hand as he turned to take one last look at Kaya. His expression was broken and he appeared to be fighting back tears as he turned away and ran off. To make things worse, Mary had stopped the approaching villagers and told them about him and what he had done. Usopp ran out of the village as the villagers continued to chase him. "Why? Won't anyone believe me? Why didn't you believe me, Kaya?" The sun was finally beginning to set, signaling the end of the day as Usopp walked aimlessly through the woods. He had finally managed to get away from the villagers and, while holding his bleeding arm, he walked along the path reminiscing on a fond memory from when he first came to help Kaya. Flashback. "Who are you?" The young, blonde lady was startled at his sudden appearance. "I'm Usopp, brave warrior of the sea. You have seemed unhappy lately, so I came by to cheer you up. I don't know why you are here, but it's wrong to meddle other people's affair, so please leave. Don't make such a fuss out of all of this, I'll just take a little of your time. Let me tell about the time I saved a whale from the North Blue when I was 3 years old." "A whale? That's right, a very large whale. His throat was hurting so I explored inside it, but he mistook me as its food." Kaya began to laugh in excitement at the silly story and insisted he keep going, waving her hands for emphasis. End flashback. The tears Usopp had tried to hold back overflowed and he began to cry at the memory, turning back to glance sorrowfully at his village through watery eyes. He knew that there would be nothing left of his village once the pirates came tomorrow and Kaya would be. He bit his lower lip as more tears ran down on his cheeks. What was he supposed to do now? "Captain." Usopp looked up from where he had been staring at his feet to see his fellow crew members waving at him from the crest of the hill. He quickly wiped away his tears and hid his injured arm behind his back before putting on a confident smile as they approached. "Oh hey, guys," he called, noticing that Zoro and Nami were with his crew. His eyes widened and his mouth noticed the raven-haired girl being held semi-possessively behind the swordsman. She tilted her head at Usopp's stare and waved, clearly alive. Usopp quickly ran towards her and asked, "Hey, you're still alive?" "Alive? Of course, I'm alive, why wouldn't I be?" Luffy asked, smiling cluelessly. "She was okay, Captain, just asleep," Carrot explained, but Luffy explained what happened. "We need get to the village and warn everyone," said Onion. "Warn everyone," Usopp repeated, the blood draining from his face as he remembered the villagers' words. "Despicable. Shut up, why should we believe you? Do you think we would fall for that? If only you were as trustworthy as Klahadore, then we might believe you." His body began to shake, his mind in turmoil as he remembered those words. Luffy and the others watched him, a little worried, when all of a sudden, Usopp started to laugh. "It was a lie, like I always do. I was so pissed at that Klahadore, so I went around saying he was a pirate." He continued to laugh, the Usopp pirates laughing with him. "Ah, I get it," said Pepper. "Even Luffy was fooled by Captain," Carrot said, his tone impressed. As the three laughed, they one by one began to walk away from the group. "Hey, where are you guys going?" Usopp asked, flinching when they turned back to look at him, and he could see the disappointed looks on his crew's faces. "I'm starting to lose respect for you, Captain," said Carrot, sighing. "Me too," exclaimed Pepper. "Me three. Even though the butler was bad, we never would have thought that you use your lies to hurt others," Onion finished, turning away from Usopp's sad face. "To think we used to look up to you, Captain." They crested the ridge, walking out of sight and leaving behind a heartbroken Usopp and the Straw Hat crew. Nighttime had come and the 14s had made their way back to the shore where Luffy had fallen. Usopp clenched his teeth as Nami tended his wound using antibiotic ointment and Luffy's green goo. Once that was done, she wrapped a bandage around Usopp's forearm and tied it tightly. "Okay, it's done. So mind telling me why you lied to them?" Luffy asked, crossing her arms over her chest as she stared down at the long-nosed teen. "'Cause I'm a liar, no one would believe me in the first place. I was too naive," he cursed, clenching his fists against the rock he sat on. "Even if you were naive, the truth is still the truth," Zoro said, keeping one eye on Luffy. He had almost lost her once today. He would be keeping an eye on her from now on. Apparently, his captain could find trouble even on a peaceful island like this. "Those pirates are really gonna attack, right?" asked Nami worriedly. "Yeah, there's no doubt that they'll be coming, but everyone thinks it's one of my lies. Everyone thinks that tomorrow will be just like any ordinary day." Usopp sighed. He looked down at his feet as his shoulders shook before he lifted his head up. "But I will stop those pirates at the coast and make sure it was just a lie," he insisted, his eyes narrowing with determination. "This is my duty as a liar. Even though they shot my arm, sniff, chased me out of the village, sob. This is still my village. I love this village, sob. I want to protect everyone." Usopp began to cry again and Zoro smirked as he watched the other teen. "Never thought that you were that kind of a guy, ditching your friends so that you could face the enemy by yourself," he chuckled, resting an arm on his swords. "Let me get this straight. All of the pirates' treasures will be mine," Nami said cockily, pointing first at Usopp and then at Luffy and Zoro. "All right." Luffy nodded at her navigator before turning back to Usopp. "We will lend you a hand." She cracked her knuckles and grinned at the long-nosed sniper. "You guys are willing to fight beside me? Why?" he asked, bewildered. "Because they have more pirates and you're going to need all the help you can get, and you're shaking like a leaf." Luffy giggled, eyeing Usopp's shaking legs pointedly. Usopp stood up quickly and declared, "Am me scared? Don't be ridiculous. It doesn't matter how many there are. It's fine by me, for I'm Captain Usopp, the brave warrior of the sea." Even after he said it, his legs wouldn't stop shaking. He cursed himself and slammed a closed fist into one leg. Okay, maybe I'm a little scared, but this is the Black Cat pirates we're talking about. I heard they killed a lot of people." He glared at Luffy, causing Zoro to frown at him slightly as he continued. "But I will fight and I don't need anyone's sympathy, so go away." "You think we're joking?" Zoro scoffed, relaxing slightly. "We're helping you 'cause we admired your courage." "If it was sympathy, would we put our lives at risk?" Luffy asked with a grin, tilting her head almost childishly. Usopp stared at the three of them, a shocked and bewildered expression on his face, and he began to tear up again. He silently thanked the heavens that Luffy and her crew had shown up when they had. He was so lucky to have met such wonderful people. Damn it, you guys. It was settled. They would begin their plan to stop the Black Cat pirates with Usopp's help. They would do whatever they could to stop the pirates from reaching the village, even if they were torn limb from limb. They would fight to the death. Syrup Village was finally starting to calm down after the hectic day that had just passed. Many of the villagers had turned in for the night, letting their weariness take them to dreamland, no fear or worry of the future invading their thoughts. All were unaware that a silent specter in a black butler suit currently stalked silently along the empty street. Normally, the villagers would just think that he was taking a stroll like any normal person, but the menacing and terrifying look on his face, an expression that promised pain and death to all that approached him, said otherwise. Stopping at the edge of the village, xAlreadyOverx, or Captain Kuro, turned and took one last look at the small town. The village that had made him a part of its community, made him one of them, but by dawn tomorrow there would be nothing left of this village or its people. Once he killed the brat and took her fortune, he could finally settle down with peace in his mind. He smirked at the thought. Everything was in place and he was finally ready to take what he had been patiently waiting for. It was true what they said, patience is a virtue. In the meantime, Usopp was currently telling Luffy, Zoro, and Nami of his plan to stop the Black Cat pirates. The only way for them to get into the village was to go past the rocky slope and cliff that they currently sat on, and Usopp had a foolproof plan to deal with them. Listen, they're planning to attack the village tomorrow morning from this very coast, Usopp said as he and the others walked along the slope. However, this is the only route that leads to the village, the rest are cliffs, which makes this village pretty defensible. There's no other way to attack. In other words, if we hold firm on this slope the village won't be attacked. Usopp described his plan. I see, that sounds simple enough, said Luffy, walking across the top of a pile of rocks like she was on a balance beam. Zoro walked next to her, one hand resting against her lower back and providing some form of stability for her balancing act. Talking is easy, but we'll need true strength for the battle. What are you guys capable of? Usopp asked, stopping and turning to face the others. Slicing, stretching, stealing, and I'll be hiding. You will be fighting, they all yelled. Luffy jumping down from her perch so she could pinch Usopp's cheek like she had done to Zoro before, and boy, she pinched hard. Just joking, I'll back you guys up, ow, would you please stop pinching my cheek? Inside Kaya's mansion, everything was quiet except the ticking sound of the grandfather clock echoing through the halls. Beyond those halls, in the servants' quarters, xAlreadyOverx and Mary were having a late-night chat, the head butler having returned from on top of a ladder, polishing the chandelier as he told xAlreadyOverx of what had happened while he was away for business. He told him that Usopp had gone mad and caused a lot trouble for both Kaya and the villagers. It pained Mary's heart to see the boy his lady trusted having gone wild and that he would go so far to hurt her. It truly pained him and Kaya. It's sad, really, I still can't believe that Usopp would do something so frightful. Even the villagers couldn't believe it. Mary sighed sadly as he polished the final edges of the chandelier. How is Lady Kaya? xAlreadyOverx asked in a fake worried tone. She was shocked but has since calmed down. She's already asleep, Mary replied. She appeared to be exhausted. xAlreadyOverx untied his tie as he walked to the window, adopting a thinking expression. I would have never thought such a thing would happen while I was away. I knew that Usopp was nothing but trouble, said xAlreadyOverx. I guess you were right about him, but what's funny though is that he claimed you were a pirate. Such a ridiculous idea, Mary chuckled. xAlreadyOverx joining in on his laughter as he stared at his reflection in the window. He was actually laughing at Mary's folly though, no one realized that Usopp's words were actually true. What fools, it surely is. Then xAlreadyOverx noticed a wrapped rectangle box lying innocently on the table next to his bed. He picked it up and turned to Mary. Is this, he asked, trailing off. That's a present from Lady Kaya to you. It has been 3 long years since you've been a part of this house, and it's an anniversary gift, Mary answered. Anniversary, it seems your glasses slip quite frequently, so Lady Kaya had this custom made for you. She is really an attentive and considerate lady, Mary said happily, silently blessing the soul of his kind mistress. xAlreadyOverx wasted no time as he unwrapped the present and opened the box to see a pair of nice-looking glasses fit just for him. He smirked, chuckling darkly as he pushed his current glasses up, adjusting them. Speaking of anniversaries, tomorrow will certainly be a day to remember, he said, more to himself than to Mary, and then he looked up at the moon shining brightly through the window. It's a crescent moon tonight, isn't it? Huh? Mary didn't quite understand where the other butler was going with his train of thought as he carefully climbed down from the ladder. A night like this makes my chest throb harder and my blood boil in excitement. Klahadore tipped his hands slightly and let the box and glasses fall to the ground before crushing them with the heel of his foot. Mary couldn't believe his eyes as he stared at his fellow butler in shock. Klahadore, what have you done to Lady Kaya's present? I have accepted the present, but it's not just that, it's everything in this mansion, he said as he turned around to face Mary, and the other man gasped as he saw the scary look on Klahadore's face. He had never seen such a look on the man's face before, and it was concerning him. What are you talking about? There's no need for me to continue this act. Klahadore adjusted his glasses as he walked slowly up to a very alarmed Mary. In a few hours, an unexpected accident will occur, he continued, pulling out his weapon and sliding it onto his right hand. It was a furred glove with 5 steel blades at the tip of each finger and thumb. These 3 years have been way too long. Mary turned, calling wordlessly out for Kaya, needing to warn her, but before he could move, Klahadore's mighty blades slashed down, slicing into Mary's chest and causing blood to pour from the wounds and drip on the floor. Silently, Mary fell forward, as if in slow motion, and crumpled to the ground with a thud. Klahadore stared down at his ex-companion with glee. It had been so long since he had had the pleasure to kill someone, and soon, Kaya and the villagers would suffer the same fate as him. In order to prepare for the coming battle, Nami had insisted that the 4 of them get up early in the morning in order to set their plan into motion. Which was why she and Usopp were currently trying to force themselves awake, fighting the persistent urge to go back to sleep. Usopp had forced himself into a sitting position, stretching numbly as he tried to force his eyes to stay open. As soon as he remembered his reason for waking up early and the images of angry, violent pirates invaded his thoughts, the long-nosed teen was suddenly wide awake. Nami, used to early wake-ups and limited hours of sleep, was already awake and currently trying to get the dying embers of their fire going again. She turned at the sound of Usopp waking up and nodded at him as he made his way over to her. "Where are Luffy and Zoro?" Usopp asked, yawning halfway through his sentence. Nami gestured to Usopp's left and the sniper turned, eyes widening at the sight in front of him. Luffy and Zoro lay a few feet away from them, splayed out on the ground together, both out cold. Zoro was stretched out on his back, his legs spread and one arm being used as a makeshift pillow. The other arm was curled around Luffy's waist, clutching the small girl to his side, her face buried in his collarbone and her body resting snugly against his chest. One leg hand been thrown haphazardly over one of Zoro's and her hand rested on his chest, clutching her straw hat. Usopp had to admit, they looked pretty cute and very comfortable. The problem was, how would Nami and him wake up the two without getting stabbed by one of Zoro's swords? Nami followed Usopp's stare to the two and sighed, running her fingers through her hair in an effort to brush out the tangles. "They're all yours, Usopp," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "I have to wake them up all the time, it's your turn." Usopp grimaced and turned to pout at the orangeette, but the other teen refused to look at him and he eventually gave up, sighing. He pulled out a pinball from one of his pouches and, aiming carefully, attempted to toss it so that it would hit Luffy lightly on the forehead. He had miscalculated the distance though, and the metal ball ended up slamming into one of Zoro's eyelids. The green-haired teen's eyes snapped open and he leveled a glare at Usopp, who scrambled backwards and away from the dark and threatening aura emitting from the swordsman. "Get your lazy ass up," Nami yelled from the fire, and Usopp breathed a sigh of relief when Zoro's murderous glare turned to the other teen and darkened, no longer focused on himself. Grumbling, Zoro forced himself into a sitting position, maneuvering Luffy so that she was resting comfortably in his lap. He knew the she-pirate would wake up soon from all the movement. He was finally starting to come to terms with the fact that waking up to Luffy in his arms was going to become a daily occurrence, and he wasn't as bothered by that little fact as he felt like he should be. He frowned, trying to pinpoint where his thoughts had started to go when the girl in question squirmed against his chest, blinking herself lazily awake. She stared up at Zoro, a small pout on her face, not completely happy with being woken up so early, and Zoro grinned down at her. "Morning, Lou." "Morning. R.O., she yawned, stretching out her limbs before resting her head back against his chest, letting her eyes slip closed again. Zoro followed suit, completely content to fall back asleep sitting up when Luffy suddenly started in his lap, tackling her first mate to the ground. "Zoro," She yelled, grinning down at him happily, the very picture of excitement. "We get to beat up some pirates today. Get up." She leapt off the swordsman and ran over to Usopp, pestering the other boy and asking if he had any food that she could eat, because obviously she couldn't fight without eating. Zoro just turned his head to watch her, still in a bit of shock at her sudden shout, one hand reaching out to make sure that his swords were still nearby. When his fingers brushed Watto's hilt, he relaxed, watching his captain dance around the campfire excitedly, his lips ND smile. She really was something else, he thought as he let himself slip back into sleep, a smile still on his face. They would wake him later when they needed him.